I know we usually eat dinner before I tell stories here in the living room, but I feel like you kids want to be eating while I tell this story. And don't worry, I already ate. I think you kids are going to find tonight's story pretty exciting. This is where your Uncle Ian had one of the toughest fights he's had in all of his adventures. Yeah, one of them. Still, that says a lot. I fought a lot of things in my life, but what I found down there in Godell'gar was something else. To start off, I left the palace after I was given the task, but I managed to talk myself into some extra gear that I could pick up. The Crown Prince gave me what was pretty much a royalty-approved shopping list, and it has his signature on the seal. When you have a job like mine, you can't just come in a place like Godell'gar without a plan. As much as I want to just hop right in there and put some bodies back where they belonged, I had to spend a few hours shopping for things. I bought some silver daggers that were small enough for me to conceal around my body, and even better, there was even a short sword in stock too, a silver one. Where'd I get it? It's a fair question, considering I was looking for pretty strange things. There's actually this interesting shop in Ulandar that sells all sorts of strange occult stuff. The business was legit, as far as I could tell. It was run by an interesting kind of beastkin I've never met before. Ratfolk. It's literally in the name. They're humanoid rat people. They're kind of pretty rare from what I noticed. I've never really met anyone like the one I met there. Anyway, after that, I went to the church for holy walk, among other things. They insisted to give out their services for free, since I was under the orders of the Crown Prince himself. The way everyone wanted to be on his good side said a lot in my opinion. I got several vials of holy water, and while I spoke about the undead with the priests, and borrowed some books I could read, the other members of the clergy blessed my equipment, although they couldn't bless everything. So I picked the obvious ones. My set of plate armor from Helmut, and my greatsword. I also asked if they had a blessed amulet of Rosanna, which, I'm sure you kids know she's the goddess of death and the afterlife. They didn't have one though, which was unfortunate since it had a useful blessing that lets you survive a killing blow. The magic of the amulet takes the strike for you, and it shatters it, but you get to keep fighting. The blessing ritual took a few hours, so I stayed in the church's archives and read about the undead. I learned a fair bit. There was a lot that I already knew, but I read some things about white and how dangerous they were. That's going to be relevant later. After the church, I went to an old friend's apothecary. Still smelled the same after all those years. Dried grass, with some aging herbs, and a sweet scent that blended with the earthiness. It smelled nostalgic. I mean, it smelled good. But it was nostalgic. I knew the dwarven lady behind the counter, Acela Gerald. She's a good friend of mine, and we had a bit of a fling in our younger years, but that was a long time ago. She's still a great friend of mine up until now. No, What's with those looks? I was young once, kiddos, as hard as that is to believe. I had my fair share of doing dumb things with friends and, committing to a few relationships. You kids laugh now, but you're gonna experience it too, I think your older siblings can attest to that. Anyway, opening details of my younger self's love life for the sake of my dignity, I was in Acela's shop because I was there to buy a few things. She told me she expected me to drop by at some point, when she heard I was visiting, but she wasn't expecting to hear that I picked a fight with the captain of the Royal Guard. And, having an audience with the Crown Prince, that was also a big deal. I bought a handful of healing potions and a pair of particularly powerful healing potions. She went to a college for wizards and artificers, and she told me she was one of the top students there. So I'd say I more than trust her when it comes to things that I bring in a life or death scenario. Besides potions, I also commissioned her to make me a set of bombs that had a decent enough splash range to catch a bunch of undead. I gave her the vials of holy water, and she got to work. Which was again another few hours. So we had some fun like the good old days while she worked, and I even got to tell her some of my stories. Like what I'm doing right now. What do I mean by what, kiddos? Oh. Oh. Anyway, she was done after a few hours, and I kept the stuff somewhere where I could reach it. Easily. It's kind of important when you're in a fight. By the way, since I was doing my shopping in full plate armor, I was getting a lot of stares and people whispering. More often than not, I attract way more attention than necessary in cities and towns I go to. Don't get me wrong, it's good when I need a job, but I get a bit paranoid that a lot of people are talking about me, and the things I supposedly do. It can attract the wrong kind of attention. Did your mother hear about the fight? Delilah heard about it for sure. She gets information faster and better than a few guilds dedicated to that kind of work. I don't even know how she does it. Regardless if it's in the city or here in the Radiant March. It was around late afternoon when I had everything I needed to go. I came back to the palace and I was escorted to the entrance of Godell'gar. And let me tell you, kiddos, nothing says no pressure like one of the most elite soldiers in the country being carried out by medics from the entrance of a very scary looking tunnel system. Tarzan saw me out and wished me luck, and so did the other guards. The large doors behind me were shut tightly. The corridor before me was the torches on the side, but it was still pretty dim. This is where my adventure starts. The corridor looked like it was used as some kind of safe zone. I sat near the door, made sure it was locked, and summoned my familiar. Yeah, I have that ritual book, remember? The Find Familiar ritual was already on this book when I found it in that cave I went into. I don't use it as often, but in times like Godell'gar, I found it very useful. I had a look at the map before taking a bit of a nap while I saw through my familiar's eyes after I told it to go scout around. I think my recon took about 15 minutes before I had a nice picture of what to expect. Especially those phantom warriors roaming around closer to the other sections with the altars. There were plenty of tunnels that led to unmarked areas according to the map. Pair that up with some monsters to fight, that's all I needed to know that I'm heading the right way. I'm going in blind after all. Sometimes it's the best way to go about it, it's the simplest way. So, happy that nothing broke down the door while I was looking through my familiar, I started exploring. I kept in mind that I had limited resources and that I shouldn't stay here for long. The first thing I fought were those ghostly knights that were guarding the halls. I taunted one to come after me, so I could try to split up the fight. I ran back as soon as I see it start running towards me, and as soon as it rounded the corner, I brought down my sword on it. Digging deep into its incorporeal body, after that blow, all it took was one clean thrust to the chest to kill it. My sword was magical, after all. Strangely enough, it turned into ash or dust instead of dissipating like most spirits. I had a back and forth with the next knight, but it wasn't too much of a problem. I risked this fight since there were no other ways for me to get to the unexplored areas. But as soon as I could start taking alternate routes, I did. I walked around a bigger hall which looked like an entrance to an altar, and right there, before the entrance of one of the shrine's worship rooms, past some kind of archway entrance, was a horde of zombies, just standing there. I observed for a bit, and I noticed that there was a corpse lying across the entrance. The upper torso was in ashes, while the lower half was still rotting, but intact. The zombies can't go through hollowed grounds. They'll end up hurting themselves. Now, I'm not sure what came over me. I don't know if I forgot that I had one of those holy water bombs, or if I was too conscious about saving resources. But I decided to just hug the wall and tiptoe past the damn things while they gawked at the room they couldn't enter. In full plate armor. And here's the thing, somehow, that miraculously worked. I know you kids expected me to be all serious about this story, but I really just want to bring this up. I don't know how that actually happened, and I don't think I'll ever know. Zombies can still hear, and they're not that dumb. So, Anyway, back to more serious parts of the story. After walking through that room undetected, it was just more hallways that either led to the other shrines, or tighter passageways to an unmarked area. The next shrine over was the extent of my recon earlier. Beyond there, I'm completely blind. I took the closest tunnel that led to one of the unmarked places, following dark hallway after dark hallway. I only could ever really hear shuffling of footsteps from undead or the moaning of spirits from afar. Sometimes dangerously close, but without me actually seeing them. I was focused on the sounds. I can't light every torch I see, otherwise I'll be more obvious than I already was with my clanking armor. There was a distinct difference between the noises the undead make and footsteps similar to my own, minus the metal. I started finding pathways that led me closer to the noise. My eyes have adjusted to the darkness just a little bit, from a distant torch providing very little light. And then I heard footsteps. They started getting louder and faster from a tunnel to my left. Then I see purple fire emerge from darkness, lighting up the hallway in an ominous glow. The mate responsible was looking where she casted her fire. I still wasn't sure what I was looking at, but when I did realize, she had already pretty much tackled me into the ground, thinking I was some kind of obstacle or something. I didn't completely lose my footing, though. She fell on the ground while I tried to see what she was firing at. It turned out to be a wight. A very dangerous kind of undead that can drain your energy. Not just your normal energy, kiddos. A wight can absorb the very essence of life out of you. It's what makes them so dangerous, even for me, whether it was back then or now. This side hallway was being lit up by a wight covered in this purple fire. Because of the restrictions, I can't exactly do any big swings or sweeps here. So I had to hold my sword by the blade. It's not a safe technique without gloves or training, but it made precise hits easier, and in a situation like this, I had to do everything I can. The wight, I would guess, must have been some kind of soldier when it was still alive, because it fought like one. Like it knew how to fight in these kinds of places. The frightening part of the whole fight was when it disarmed me and grabbed me somewhere close to my collar. I felt its dark magic begin to take me. My silver dagger was ready. I couldn't reach for my short sword at this point, and I was gonna stab it right on its arm. But then a whole fire just engulfed the area. Except, similar to before, the fire went around me. The wight had put me down in favor of protecting itself. I took the opportunity to grab my sword and finish the thing off. One over-the-shoulder chop, and I digged through every inch of it until it was in half. Catching my breath, I turn around and, well, you kids already know who it is. It's everyone's favorite witch, Zephyr. We had an awkward laugh about seeing each other in another creepy, possibly evil location, and, well, we hit it off like always. We already knew the drill at this point. Watch each other's backs, and don't die. She explained to me that she was here because she felt another presence that needed to be eradicated, similar to what happened with the Schattenritter. We did our best to keep quiet and track the presence that Sophia's been following. We got a little closer to the little Hall of Heroes they have down here before we delved deeper into the pathways. After a while, not sure how long, there were light sources ahead of us. It clearly wasn't us, so that means there were some signs of life down here. We moved in closer to the right turn, and when I peeked over the edge to look, something immediately tries to grab my face. I swing my blade as a response, and it goes down. It was just a run-of-the-mill zombie, but my scream definitely gave us away. Sophia and I got a proper look at what was ahead. It was a pair of doors that were about to close, and some kind of ritual taking place beyond it. We rushed toward it, but it was too late. They closed and were left outside. I saw some kind of humanoid standing by an altar surrounded by whites, and it stared right at me just before the doors closed with some kind of hatred. I didn't have time to brood on it though. We had to get through this door. Sophia tells me to back away and get ready to dash inside. So, I step back. Actually, I step back a lot. She casts her spell, sending some kind of shockwave that sent vibrations to the air, but more importantly, breaking the tall stone doors down. That was my cue to run in. Pulling away its attention from whatever ritual it was busy with, our blades clash, and I got a good look at this guy. Dying grey skin and glowing eyes. It was a revenant, and while it was winning our little clash of blades, it calls me a rune knight with an old, raspy voice. He redirects my blade and gives me a good gash on my shoulder right through the armor. Whatever kind of sword he had was no joke. Went through my armor like it was just paper. Sophia casted her spell. I could tell from how unnaturally slow moving that everything was, except the revenant. Everything began to slow, but this revenant just flinched. I had a feeling the spell was supposed to affect him too, but it was strong enough to resist. Sophia shouted at me to be careful, that this revenant wasn't just any kind of undead, but I had no choice. It was either him or us. Each time her blades met, I could feel his hate from the words he said. He spoke of the Great War, and the rune knight that killed him in battle, and that killing me was one step closer to ending his curse. His swings were ridiculously strong and quick. I mean, I can boast about my speed when I wield a greatsword, but not to this one. If I committed to any one string of attacks, he would outpace me on the third strike. After a particularly nasty slash across my chest, my back was against a wall and I was out of balance. The only thing I could do was raise my leg and kick him away, and seeing his near-perfect footing loosen up, I took that as an opportunity to just move in. I move into an attack. He recovered using his momentum and swung a power strike. Had I not raised my sword to protect me at the very last second, I wouldn't be telling you guys this story. Unfortunately, that came at a price. The revenant's swing was so strong it shattered my greatsword, snapping it in half in the middle. I was dazed after that. I didn't think something was so strong that could actually shatter a blade. The last thing I saw was Sophia raising her staff and firing rays of purple fire at the whites, and even at the revenant. She screamed my name while I went down. It was another slash that just made me succumb to my wounds completely. And, you know, kiddos, honestly, I thought that was it for me. Everything went dark, my breathing slowed, everything got cold. I thought that was it. I woke up all of a sudden. My wrists were chained on the wall behind me above my head. Sophia was across the small cell we were in, sobbing. There was great happiness in her face when she saw me, but she knew that we weren't safe yet, and the situation was still dire. She didn't look as battered as I was, but she did look like she was about to have a breakdown, and I can't blame her for that. I asked her why we were kept alive, and she told me that her staff's crystal had more power for the ritual than whatever they were already using, and that she would destroy it if they didn't cooperate. The Revenant gave in to her demands and kept us alive, but they threw us in a cell. I was barely alive. My wounds had been closed up and healed, but they were far from fully restored. This is where Sophia told me all about herself, and the things leading up to this. She spoke like this was going to be her resting place, and I mean, I can't blame her for that. Sure felt like it, definitely. And like I said before, I was happy she could confide in me with all the things she could never say to another person in fear of her insecurities. was all the more reason for me to believe that both our journeys were not done yet. A quiet filled the room as she was finished speaking. I stopped struggling in my chains at some point to just listen to her speak. I told her that I'm not letting either of us die in this place. I promised her, actually. She chuckles, and she smiled at me, thanking me for my kindness now and all the other times we had met. It was nice. I started pulling downwards on the chains again, keeping my feet to the ground and clenching my fists. Just when Sophia was about to suggest something, I rip out one of these old rusty chains and manacles off my wrists. Actually, it was more like I ripped out the hinge from the wall itself, but either way, I was still free. I just had to do the same with my other arm, which wasn't too hard with proper leverage. Sophia was pretty surprised by that display of strength, and honestly, I was a little surprised too, considering my shape at the time. I took a brick from the ground and I broke through Sophia's chains as well. She then told me she had a spell to open the door. Couldn't blame her. Wizards like her had to conserve her powers for when she actually had to use them. Practitioners of magic need a nice long rest before they get their powers back, and we didn't exactly have time for a sleepover. We spoke at the same time about having a plan. I let her speak first. She told me that I should head to the surface while she cleans up this mess. I remind her that I literally just promised her that neither of us is gonna die here. And one of us leaving each other alone is definitely an easy way to break that promise. We have a little back and forth until she said she had an idea, but we had to go through the Hall of Heroes. My pack was conveniently just beside the cell door as soon as we exited, so I checked my map before realizing I had no clue where we were. I had to rely on Sophia's direction, and in combat, all I had were my daggers. Seems like my short sword was confiscated. I drank plenty of healing potions since I was pretty sure that my current situation can be considered an emergency. I kept one of those stronger potions for later though. Sophia actually asked me a few things on our way there. Most notably, how I could stay so brave after everything that's happened so far. Why I was still standing, why I was so adamant on killing this thing, or just being here. What'd I tell her? I told her I have every reason to be afraid right now, but I know lives are at stake here, so I'm not letting myself get distracted. She already told me that this ritual could bring more undead here, or even fiends. And that only spelled trouble for everyone on the surface, not just us. We were the only line of defense so far, and I wasn't going to let fear get the better of me. I know it didn't really answer her question, and in all honesty, people can be brave for a multitude of reasons. Mine was simply mind over matter. I had more important things to worry about than fuss about the details. I had to use my holy water bomb, finally. It was effective against dealing with the undead guarding the entrance. They didn't exactly go down in one hit, but Sophia's fire made quick work of them. I wasn't really much use, except for my items without a weapon. Inside this area were a lot of statues of different heroes and members of the royal family. I wanted to look around. All the artistry that went into those statues was amazing. But Sophia said we had to hurry. I followed her to a tall statue of a knight, clad in armor, and posed with an untarnished sword pointed to the ground. This was Caroline Omer, the legendary rune knight of the Highlands. There's quite a story associated with that name, but I'll save it for next time. Sophia told me that her real sword from the Great War was kept down here because of its importance, and that no one, not even her children, could use the sword to its full potential like she did. The sword was ridiculously heavy, and in terms of traditional smithing practices, the weight balance was bad due to the span, length, and thickness of the blade. And it was as if the sword was only meant for ceremonial or decorative purposes, yet Omer the Undaunted wielded it like it was as light as a short sword. This is the legendary sword, Exalted Crimson. I wanted to marvel at its beauty first, but whites and phantom warriors began to breach the room. At that point, there was no time for hesitation. I grasped the sword while it was still held in place by the statue's palms on its pommel, and I pulled it into my hands, twirling it to a stance. Kids, I gotta tell you, this thing was impossible to use. I could only tackle the incoming white since I couldn't swing the sword with any kind of reasonable accuracy. I'd be too slow. I realized that this must have been why it was never inherited by her sons and daughters. Sophia thought I could use it temporarily since it was the only weapon she knew that was here that was still magical and usable. I shouted at her that I couldn't use the sword, that it was too unwieldy, it was impossible. She couldn't respond after failing to evade the grasp of a white. I knew she wasn't anything like me. If I could be hit by something like that, I'd have the physical constitution to stay alive, but her, I didn't know if she would make it. I grasped the sword tightly, and I roared. Little did I notice that I dashed across the short distance between us, holding this once impossibly heavy sword with one hand. And I cleaved through the white in one blow. And as I realigned my stance back to back with Sophia, the blade began showing the runes that Lady Omer had used in the war. I could feel its ancient runic power synergize with my body, and from then on, it seems the legendary sword had chosen its new rune knight to wield its power. Despite this, Sophia and I still had to fight for our lives in that area. I couldn't waste my energy yet. There was still a bigger enemy to deal with. I used another bomb and splashed everyone I could with some holy water while I covered Sophia's retreat to the other side of the room. She needed a safer space to sling her spell since she was beginning to get attacked too. I became the wall that separated her and the remaining whites. So far, I was only hit once this whole fight, and I took out 3 of them, and one of those phantoms. So they had every reason to be on guard. They rushed me at the same time, but one of them ran past me, while the other one actually fought me. It missed its initial strike, and I parried the next, followed it with one slash down its shoulder, killing it, and then a quick backstep to realign my stance to catch the other white before it could escape my reach. Sophia took care of the rest and finished it with ribbons of fire, burning up most of its torso. We gave each other a pat on the back, and we kept going. I gave her the stronger healing potion, while we found our way back to where we had to go. Our journey wasn't over yet. We still had some fight in us. On our way there, Sophia told me that she only expected me to be strong enough to carry the sword. The activation of dormant runic magic was completely unforeseen. She said that there must be some kind of reason the sword found me to be a worthy heir. She wasn't sure if it was my blood or heritage, or my existing powers as a rune knight. Like I said before, I'm not royalty. And the second guess wasn't convincing either. Omer's children were rune knights themselves, but the sword didn't respond to them like it did with me. I can save speculation for later, I guess, so let's continue for now. The whites were only a little easier to fight with Exalted Crimson. They were experienced warriors in life, and they never go down without a fight. But I was far from worn out when we entered the ritual area for round 2. The Revenant looked more humanoid now, less undead, and it was clad in black armor. "You wield her sword, squire," he said to me. I can tell that whatever this ritual was slowly bringing him back to his original strength. You kids want to know what I said back? "It seems Lady Omer has chosen me to bring you down in her stead. It'll be an honor." And let me tell you, kids, I saw the anger in his eyes. I wasn't afraid. Mind over matter and all that, but also because wielding Exalted Crimson fills me with a different kind of bravery and courage. Personally, I believe that the sword still carries a little bit of Carol and Omer's spirit and heroism. And as the sword's new wielder, I'm getting a glimpse of what she was like in that ancient battlefield. What she felt when she stood there against an entire army leading her soldiers to battle. I issued him a formal duel. I thought it was a long shot, but I didn't want Sophia anywhere near this thing. She disagreed and insisted she fight when I told her, but the man spoke, and I got his name. Hiron Ursen, a Mordos Legion general during the Great War. Omer will regret making a squire her champion, were his last words before the fight started. With Sophia at the entrance of the room and his undead servants at the other end spectating, it was just me and him. His attacks were a perfect mix of swift and deadly. Despite how quick his blows were, I could still feel the full weight of his strikes right on the blade. It was a good few seconds of nothing but clashing of magic steel against steel, our stances constantly shifting and moving across the room. After a particularly powerful strike, we locked swords and he was gaining on me quick. I invoked the Storm Rune, and I know he saw what I did. He disengages and creates distance. He called me out on invoking the insight of storm giants, as Almir did in their fight. He rushes in and feints me, striking me where I was open, despite having the advantage of foreseeing it. Luckily, I was able to break his guard after 2 swings, slashing through the metal armor he wore. This was immediately followed by a hasty overhead swing that I parried easily, and a backstep leading to a lunge that I narrowly avoided by taking one side of his face and bringing the full weight of the blade across his body as I spun to meet his gaze after a devastating blow. He was far from done, but he was bleeding. He picked up a second sword from the ground, and he got increasingly more vicious with his fighting style. I was only able to block his attacks because of how light Exalted Crimson was, and while I was on the defensive, I invoked the Frost Rune, allowing me to have the strength to completely overpower his 2 incoming swords from above. My own swing completely knocked him out of balance. But I wasn't ready yet. I needed one last thing before I retaliated. Even without having the room to increase in size, I still gained the immense strength of giants. I was completely worn out at this stage. I was covered in cuts, blood, and I knew I was close to dropping. He regained his footing, while I was ready for one last bout. Out of breath, but I'm still in my battle stance. In a fight like that, kiddos, nothing else in the world exists except you, the battlefield, and the enemy. The Storm Rune showed me every single possibility that was going to happen a few seconds from now, and I closed my eyes to await which one happens. I will not be felled by the same tricks again, Omer, he shouted as he dashes across our distance with a dangerously strong opening swing. He was angry. He was losing his way. There was no discipline in his strikes anymore. And in my moment of pure clarity, I blocked his blow cleanly, and then blocked the follow-up strike, and the next, and the one after that. The only thing he could say as he loses himself in anger was just to tell me to die. I take a swift step back, avoiding his double overhead swings, and I open my eyes to Exalted Crimson coated in powerful runic energy. The blade glowed with an energy that could cleave through an entire army, like what the legends say. I utter a word of power, and the blade crackled with energy. And I bring down Exalted Crimson down on the undead warlord, shattering his 2 blades as he tries to block it, and completely obliterating him. A strong wave of magic erupts like a shockwave throughout the entire underground. And, just like that, the presence was gone. I actually never noticed the presence like Sophia did until it was actually absent. She came to my aid using a scroll she saved for emergencies. I could only really chuckle at everything while she chants her magic and gives me a few taps in the face to see if I was still alive. I lost a good, or bad, amount of blood in that fight, so I can't blame her for being worried. The word of power? What it was for? Well, I do it to invoke runes, and for some reason, I just knew instinctively that I had to do the same for the sword to release its full potential. What was the word? Oh, well, it's giant. Oath elect. It means indomitable in common. I don't know why that was the word I used, but it was the first thing that came to mind. Zofia used a scroll with some kind of healing magic inscribed onto it, helping me recover a lot. Come to think of it, that's how a lot of these adventures with her end up. Me on the ground, and her using some kind of magic or potion to bring me back to life. Well, not literally. I never died. There are legends regarding that, but we'll save that for next time. We left the underground. The Crown Prince greeted us, and we explained everything. I give Sophia the credit she deserves. She does her work as quietly as possible, since the Keepers can be prime targets for certain groups. I was definitely questioned a lot about why I was carrying the sword of a legendary rune knight. I even twirled it and swung it around to prove the sword had attuned to me. The Crown Prince awarded me with the agreed money and a personal commendation. The public can't know what happened down there, but he assured me that what Zufi and I did will be remembered by the royal family. And I got to keep the sword too, so there's that. And, even better, we were also treated dinner, since we were just in time for it, apparently. We even got to wash up in the private bathhouse within the palace. It was great. I'd say it was worth it. Like what I said before, kids, don't be me, or at least, I don't know. I still don't think I'm that great of a role model, considering the things I say sometimes. But that was the story of how I got Exalted Crimson, the legendary sword of Carolyn Omer the Undaunted. I carry her bravery and courage with pride. Back then, Rune Knights treated each other like brothers and sisters. We were all warriors united by the powers the giants granted us. So, maybe Omer knows that I'm one of the last of our kind these days, and that's why the sword chose me. But who knows? Swords don't talk. At least not this one. Well, I hope that was a fun story, kiddos. Let's clean up and get to bed. Remembering all that was kinda tiring. Come on.